God is near. Are you aware that God is nearer to you than you think He is? So many times we go through tough and uncertain times and we wonder where God is. We wonder if God is near us. And we need that assurance that we have not been forgotten. We feel that we've been forgotten. We feel that people have forgotten us. We feel that God has forgotten us. We feel lonely. We feel alone in our situation. Do we ask ourselves questions like, do other people even know and identify with what I'm going through? We might have lost a job and we don't know how we're going to pay our bills, and we think, do other people understand what I'm going through? I'm going through the trauma of not knowing where I'm going to buy my food, how I'm going to feed my family, how I'm going to pay the bills, and I might lose my house. I might lose everything, and we might be going through other traumas. People might have ganged up against us for no particular reason, and you don't know who you can trust. You've been stabbed in the back. That's to say, you know, by someone you thought you could trust, and you found out that you can't trust them, or you've gone through family problems and strife, and you're wondering, do other families actually go through these things? Do other families struggle like this in the same way? Let me assure you that your situation isn't as unique as you think it is. Your emotional trauma, your physical trauma, your strife in relationships, it is experienced by many people. There are others who do understand what you're going through. There are others who have gone through exactly the same things, and your situation isn't unique. We need to just find those people so that we can have a community who identify with us. However, our source of comfort isn't primarily from people. God uses people to comfort us, but our comfort, our strength, our encouragement comes from people. Even if it does come from people, the source is always God. God is the source of our comfort, the source of our strength, the source of our encouragement. In Psalm 145, from verse 13b, the Lord is faithful to all his promises and loving toward all he has made. The Lord upholds all those who fall and lifts up all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at their proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways and loving toward all he has made. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. That's up to verse 18. There's just three things that we're going to look at that when we are going through these times, and that is the faithfulness of God, the care of God, and the nearness of God. The faithfulness of God in times of trouble and uncertainty, we need to know that God is still faithful. We need to know his faithfulness. Here in the psalm it says, in times of trouble or uncertainty, we need to know the faithfulness of God, that the Lord is trustworthy. Verse 13b, the Lord is trustworthy in all his promises and faithful in all he does. He is trustworthy in all his promises, everything, and faithful in all he does. He isn't trustworthy in some of his promises, but in all his promises, and faithful in all he does, everything. He does what he promises. Besides others, he has promised to care for us and to be close to us at all times. And this is what, so when you're going through these troubles, these difficulties, these hardships, this trauma, physical or emotional, whatever it might be, we need to know and understand the faithfulness of God, but also that God cares. The care of God. Have you fallen in any way? And have you possibly stumbled in sin or fallen under the weight of burdens put on you by circumstances? You may be bound under the weight of them. And what does God say in his word here? The Lord upholds all who fall and lifts up all who are bowed down, in verse 14. All. Upholds them all. Each one of us. Will God provide for us at this time? Will we get through? We ask. And he has promised that he will provide. He has promised that he will provide. Look at verse 15. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them food at their proper time. You give them food at their proper time. David says, and went through this experience, and he says and he writes in Psalm 37, verse 25, I was young and now I'm old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their children begging bread. And God is faithful to the righteous. God is faithful to those, he's faithful even to the unrighteous. He says, Jesus said, doesn't the sun rise on the righteous and the wicked alike? Doesn't it rain on the righteous and the wicked alike? God is in all his mercy is still the provider of all, righteous and unrighteous. God is a provider. He's a God who cares for all. And this is why he says, shouldn't we also be merciful as God is merciful? Shouldn't we be like a Father in heaven who cares for all people? We don't all deserve it. We never deserve God's care. We never deserve what God gives us. But he is a merciful God who gives even to the undeserving. And that is a source of comfort for us, isn't it? That sometimes we think, are we going through this because we don't deserve God? Well, we don't deserve God. We don't deserve anything God gives us. But He gives us good things anyway. And He takes us through difficult times anyway, because He's a merciful God. And what about our spiritual and emotional needs? We may be going through some emotional trauma, depression, or feel spiritually destitute. What about those? What does His word say? You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. You open your hand and satisfy them. And what comes out of the hand of God? All good things come from the hand of God. And sometimes it doesn't seem good at the time. For example, His discipline. His discipline doesn't seem to be a good thing, but it comes out to bear the fruit of righteousness, to bear something good within us, and to take us into His purposes. The word desires comes from the root word meaning approval. And so you satisfy the approval. God shows us that He still approves of us regardless of what we're going through. He still approves of us, not based on what we do, but based on what He has done for us and who He has made us to be. So our identity and our approval doesn't lie in ourselves and who we are, but who He is, who He has made us to be, and what He has done for us, making us children of God. And so He opens His hands and approves of us. That's what it says. It satisfies our desires. It satisfies our longing for identity, our longing for approval, our longing for knowing we have not been forgotten. And this is what God does for us. What an upliftment to our hearts that our inner sense of purpose comes from Him and not from us. If it comes from us, we would go into the pit and destroy ourselves, because we have nothing good to offer. But what comes from Him is always reveals the goodness of God. What about the nearness of God? Does God feel distant to you? Does He feel far away from you? Have you felt, where is God in this? I'm going through hardship, I'm going through trial, I'm going through tribulation. Where is God in all this? Well, the Lord is near to all who call on Him, to all who call on Him in truth, according to verse 18. So God is near. God is near. God is omnipresent and is always near to us, in the sense that His presence pervades all of space. However, that isn't what is meant by this verse. At one time I stayed in Durban in a home, and the husband would come home from work at the end of the day, and he'd literally walk right past his wife, ignoring her completely. He'd go put his things down in the room. He'd come back into the kitchen where she'd be working, where she'd be cooking, and he'd completely ignore her. Not a word to her, not a hello, not a greeting, nothing. Just as if they didn't exist. And this went on day after day, evening after evening, and this is how they lived. Physically, they were present, they were there, but relationally, there was no presence at all. There was no relationship at all, and there was distance. They were distant from each other, and you see, it isn't God who drifts from us in a relationship. So even though God is with us, sometimes we don't know that He's with us. The relationship is distant because we have drifted from Him for some reason. It's us who drift from Him. And when we call on Him in truth, really and then sincerely from the heart, we understand that He is near. James 4 verse 8 says, draw near to God and He will draw near to you. And so we need to draw near to God. He is with us. But are we with Him? Do we acknowledge His presence? Do we know His presence? Do we experience His presence? Do we come to Him and speak to Him and spend time in His presence, knowing His nearness? Because He's there. He's reaching out to us. Are we reaching out to Him, calling upon Him in truth, sincerely? It is a great comfort for us to know and experience the nearness of God. Moses said to God that if your presence does not go up with us, we're not moving from this place. And Moses understood the nearness and the presence of God and the necessity of the presence of God, and knowing the presence of God if he is going to make it to the promised land. And God's presence gives us the courage and comfort to move from where we are to where He wants us to be, whether it's physically, emotionally, or spiritually. We might be in a dark place, but we need to draw near to God so that He can move us. And we say, Lord, if your presence isn't with us, we're not moving from this place. And that might not be because we don't want to, but we're acknowledging that if His presence doesn't move us from this place, we cannot move. We cannot do it ourselves. We completely relying on the absolute nearness and presence of God to move us from where we are to where He wants us to be, into a better place. I'm not necessarily saying that it's not going to be a place without hardship, but a place within our hearts, a place where we will find rest for our hearts, where we'll have peace in our hearts. And all we need to do is to draw near to Him and call upon His name, for He is near. So are you going through trials and tribulations at this time? Are you going through hardships? Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you, for He is near.